Hey, real quick, before we dive into today's episode, if you've been feeling like your brand needs a little love, but you're not quite sure where to start, I have just the tool you need. The Standout Brand Audit Bot is an AI-powered guided audit that shows you exactly what's working, what's not, and how to strengthen your brand using my proven Standout brand system. In 10 minutes or less, you'll walk away with clear next steps to move your brand forward with purpose. It's completely free. Just head to the show notes to grab the link and get started. You probably thought that when you started your own business, you would be done dealing with things like HR. I know I certainly did. And I think when we think of HR and an HR department and what HR people do, it's a lot of hiring and firing and managing people and all of the kind of annoying parts of working in corporate. But that is not the case. Kira LaForgia is an HR expert who actually enjoys things like W-2s, FMLA, and FLSA. She has a decade of experience in people operations in the corporate world, and she's no stranger to the sensitive issues involved in the human side of running a business. Kira founded her company, Paradigm Consulting, to bridge the gap between corporate HR policies and the modern needs of online entrepreneurs. I'm so excited to share Kira's training that she gave inside the Six Figure Brand Society with you on the podcast today. I think you're going to learn so much about how HR actually does apply to your online business. Specifically, she's going to cover the role of people in scaling your business, deciding what HR model is right for you, HR's function in protecting your business legally, the difference between contractors and employees, this was a huge one for me, and recent changes in independent contractor law that affect your creative business. If you have any aspirations of growing a team, even if that's a team of one person, you're going to find a lot of value in this episode. Welcome to the Six Figure Brand Podcast, where each week we're pulling back the curtain on what it really takes to build a six-figure business as an online service provider. I'm your host, Morgan. I'm a branding expert, online agency owner, mom of two, and military spouse, and I'm obsessed with helping entrepreneurs like you understand the ins and outs of branding so that you can use it to grow your business without sacrificing your sanity. Whether you're just starting out or focused on scaling, we're diving into everything you need to build a profitable and sustainable online business. Let's get to it. As a quick reminder, before I turn the mic over to Kira, I just want to remind you that this was a live training from the Six Figure Brand Society Vault. I have repurposed it into a podcast episode because I think the information in here is so important for anyone growing and running and scaling an online business. And I want as many ears to hear it as possible. I've edited this training just a hair so that it fits the format of a podcast a little better, but just wanted to give you a heads up before you listen. I hope you enjoy the episode.
So my presentation is fairly short and sweet and to the point, mostly because everybody's situation is so different, especially in small business. And so there's a few key questions that I want to be able to answer in this short period of time. So one of the questions that we'll answer is literally just, what does HR do? What are the traditional functions? How it serves small businesses? Another question is risk aversion. So talking a little bit about the role that HR plays in maintaining a really compliant business and avoiding as much risk as possible, which there are ways to keep it black and white, but in most businesses, we're operating on a scale of lowering our risk as much as possible, but still trying to be profitable. And then we always end up talking a little bit about employee contractor classification, especially with creative entrepreneurs, because there was a major law that was passed last year in March that has kind of turned the industry on its head based on its preconceived notions about what it looks like to run an agency, especially a creative agency. So all of these things are to say that I will try to be as entertaining as possible when talking about these very dry topics. But I also promise to keep it short and sweet, and also to consider that while all of this is, HR can function within all 50 states, which makes us really different from attorneys. And so there's one sect of law, the labor law compliance, that HR is qualified to speak to. So that's why we are going to be different than going to an attorney, especially if you have a remote team, because they may not be able to speak to the needs of your business in multiple states or the team members in multiple states. The second layer to that is your accountant doesn't do what we do either, and they would really prefer that you didn't ask them about this stuff, primarily because they can help with the implementation of certain compliance issues. But when it comes to getting the person to do the thing and then paying the person, there's a lot of things that happen in between. So that is why your accountant or bookkeeper might send you our way. And then finally, on the kind of more management culture, business development side of things, we basically are business strategists from a people first lens. So while we do want to make sure we're maximizing profits, this presentation today is genuinely about how by centering the people in your business, you will make more money. And that is a proven fact time and time again. No matter who wants to argue with me, I will give you a quote of a very rich person at the end of this to prove my point. Basically, my goal is just to make sure that we're getting kind of this top level knowledge out there to get your brain thinking, but not to activate your nervous system. So I will do my best to try to deliver this in a way that isn't scary, but feels approachable. And really at the end, I want you to feel excited about possibilities. Know that this support is out there for you, because the one thing I hear from all of our leads coming in is, I just didn't know that there were solutions to these problems that you know how to solve. So that's been the biggest struggle for me as a business owner when it comes to running this business, is that we don't have too much competition because most of our competitors are working with corporations. So to work with small businesses, we've had to create our own path forward to make it affordable and accessible. So this is usually the part of the presentation where I'll ask people like what their biggest struggle in business is, given that we have a limited time, and I want to make sure we leave questions towards the end. Morgan, you can absolutely answer that question now to kind of get people thinking, but I really do this because I just want to make sure everyone knows like we're all kind of in the same game, and the more we see each other as resources, like the better and more successful small businesses will be. And that is, in my opinion, the only way to create equity in the world.
Yeah. My, I think, biggest struggle is growing my business sustainably in a very, 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 very limited amount of time, which it just has to involve a lot of like outsourcing and hiring and team building. And I don't have any leadership training. Like when I was in corporate, I was like the little person on the totem pole. So that's like something that I didn't know that I was going to need to know in business.
That's relatable. And usually every time someone brings up one of these issues, I will always go to the ends of the earth and say almost every struggle that you can bring to me, but yours was really easy, can be solved with a higher level of knowledge and confidence when it comes to people. And yours is such a great example, because scaling a business in limited time is not a renewable resources, but money is. So how can we use that money to basically buy back your time? And at an entry point, it's going to be little simple things, but on a scalability side, that approach is going to look totally different. So basically, I created Paradigm about 5 years ago after essentially a 2-year struggle with burnout-induced PTSD, actually diagnosed. So basically, what I want people to know about me before I dive into this is that I've made every single mistake that you could make. I've been too close of friends with people. I've put myself in situations where I was overscheduled. I've said yes to too many things. I've fought for roles that I had absolutely no time to do at the cost of my mental health, personal health, relationship health, financial health even, and like my literal physical body. So with that said, I have a little bit of a trigger when people say, oh my God, I have so much PTSD, because it's like, no, I literally got diagnosed with it. So please keep in mind that this is not just me joking about it. It's a real thing. And it really spurred on when I had my, what I call adult summer break, which I realize is really insensitive because it was COVID. It was the first time I'd ever had time to sit down and think about what I really wanted to do. And that was 6 years after I got my first mentor that focuses on employee engagement. So finally, I could take this experience and then put it into a business to help other, primarily women, but also any business owner that really wants to put people first, to build businesses that you can scale and you're also protected, lowering your risk and learning how to manage others in a way that isn't going to create more of the same burnout problems that we see in corporate in the small business world. So was a little bit of a labor of love at first, but now we are an agency. We have 6 employees, several legally classified contractors. We have an HR department, a recruiting department, and a membership. And all of those work seamlessly together, because anyone who might need recruiting probably needs HR, that probably needs to be able to be in community with others. And my basically vision for the business is being able to be an example of culture and how business can be done, utilizing really good practices within our industry to show other women what's possible while still maintaining the freedom that we started our businesses to have in the first place. So I kind of like to live the mission as much as I can. Some days are good, some days are bad, and I'm never going to sugarcoat it. So one of the questions I always get right out the gate is, and probably some of the time people are really confused about what even HR would do in the small business space, which is why I'm just happy to have this platform to tell people that we exist, because I don't want it to be the type of thing where you're in crisis and then you're coming to us, because then you're usually at a really high risk point, lots of cost. You don't know what you could have done to prevent it. And all of those things are really understandable. I know as a non-designer, I've gone to my designer in a bit of a crisis mode too, at different points, trying to figure out like how to solve certain problems, create a higher income based on our services. We really need positive design for that. So using that as like kind of the totally opposite end of the spectrum. When you come in to a creative business and you need help and you're in a crisis situation, it's not that much different actually than coming to your HR person while you're in a crisis situation, because you're short on time, you're short on resources, and you can now clearly see all the mistakes that you made along the way. So while this might feel really scary because we're talking about legal and, financial consequences, I would actually argue that those are also really considerations when working with creatives. We will lose a crap ton of money if our design looks like crap, or if our copy isn't aligned, if our messaging isn't there, if our strategy isn't there, if our legal documents backing up those things isn't there. And so I think there's a lot to discuss in regards to the actual HR function, because people don't realize how many different departments in traditional business HR is responsible for. And our general area of expertise is ever evolving. So as business has changed and, into a remote environment, or different types of accountabilities, or dealing with our current government situation, or whatever the case may be, HR tends to be the first person on the front line that is expected to solve the problems, but also the last person to be brought into any type of change-making environment. So where we want to really change where HR works within business is to really emphasize the strategy that we can bring, and how all of these functions that are listed here are really interconnected. So an easy example is your strategic growth is obviously going to be based on your recruiting strategy, especially if you're trying to scale a business as a solopreneur or someone that wants to build a team. Because also, if you're a solopreneur and you want to have some strategic growth, then you have to understand the compliance around how people are classified, which means that your offers are going to clearly and directly reflect what your business can handle based on the model that you want to have. So if you're a solopreneur, your offers are going to look a lot different than somebody that has a legally binding, or a legally compliant, I should say, team. And when I say team, I usually mean employees, although we all know teams are made of lots of different things. From that point, if you decide that you want to be solo, then you're going to have to hire experts in their field, follow their processes, follow their policies. And so that's going to affect how you are training and developing team members that may be interacting with those contractors. So every single area here is going to not necessarily be living in a silo, but it falls under the HR function. All of that is to say that in a corporate environment, each of these areas are usually going to have a team of specialists. So while in small business, we have one consultant, us, that's going to help you with all of these things, most businesses don't function properly without expert advice in each of these specializations. In some businesses, there's usually like a chief culture officer. Sometimes they call them a chief people officer. In small business, we don't have the budget for that. So what Paradigm has done is essentially created a pathway where in 90 days, we can tackle how these all interconnect within your small business and help you make a plan for growth while protecting you on the compliance side. So when you think about HR, I'm not here to overwhelm you, but I just want to show you the power that it has. You don't have to have an individual that is an expert in all these different functions to get results from HR. It could just be something as simple as I would say that protection from legal issues is kind of one of the gateway drugs of HR. Usually when someone realizes they have to get workers' comp and then they're like, oh crap, what does that mean? That is like the littlest, teeniest, tiniest obstacle. Like we don't even really deal with that. We just tell you to buy the insurance. So I always want to just kind of emphasize that while you might be coming to us in a crisis point, which we hope you won't, we hope you'll do it now before you're in crisis. But while you may be coming to us from a crisis point, there are so many other things that we're going to be able to address based on just you opening up about what your business and your team is doing, what your goals are, and how we can make sure that everything is rolled in. I just had a meeting with a client earlier today that we kind of flipped our process on its head. And instead of focusing on the expectations for her very large and expansive team, team, what we really needed to do was focus on what goals she had for herself and the dream job she wants to have in her company so that we could reverse engineer that into the rest of the team. So that's just a really good example of approaching things from a crisis perspective versus approaching things from a strategic perspective. And I probably could calculate it over time, but the reason that is really valuable for her and why she's one of our clients is because she's already wasted thousands of dollars on talent that was in the wrong position, setting herself up for having a job that she hates as a founder. So realistically, we're saving her money by putting her in her dream job, which I honestly can't even think of a better pitch. Now, we're going to go into the negative part of things, which is essentially when people hire us. So we want to get ahead of all of this. And that's why I'm here. And that's why if you want me to talk at any other group or podcast or YouTube or anything, I will do it, because we want to try to put ourselves in a position to support you with preventing any of these penalties from happening, because they are completely within your control. People often will resist hiring a team, bringing on employees, et cetera, because it feels like a lack of control they have over the risk within their company. But realistically, making sure that you have everything set up in order on the compliance side is going to reduce your risk drastically, whether you hire someone or not. So at the end of the day, these penalties, I just kind of put in this pyramid thing because I want to show you the weight of what each of these are. But I also will say that the number one thing is misclassification. So we have a resource that we're going to send over, which is basically, we call it a resource roundup, because last year when the classification of employees and contractors changed at a federal level, it basically caught the rest of the country up to where about 30 states were already operating within their state law. So there's 6 different factors that you have to measure when it comes to misclassification of contractors. I'm not going to go too far into this now because there is so many resources out there that can help explain this to you.
Is your brand feeling a little off? Like your visuals, messaging, and your overall vibe just are not lining up with where your business is headed? You probably don't need another pretty logo. You actually need a solid strategy behind your brand. That's exactly what we'll build together inside the Standout Brand Strategy session, a one-on-one deep dive into your brand foundation so that you can finally show up with clarity, consistency, and confidence. And if you're thinking about working with Spect & Co. on branding or web design, this is your first step for every single project that we do together. Clients who've gone through this process have tripled their audience size, doubled their revenue, and raised their rates by 30% or more. Use the link in the show notes to book your session, and don't forget to enter code SFBPOD at checkout to save $100.
But one thing I will say is, and just want to say really quick, is that I didn't pick up the law. It's not my fault. And we can help you and try to turn this on its head and make it a great opportunity for you to restructure your team if you find that you're in a position that you have been misclassifying people. Because these fines, when I say 5K plus, the 5K fine that I'm talking about is a company that hired teachers to build courses in 2020 and has since been paying them essentially royalties, where they essentially got a $5,000 fine when those people don't even work at the company because they were misclassified based on agreements that were set forth in 2020 when these teachers helped to create these materials. So this client, obviously, of course, she loves us. But at the end of the day, she had to hire an HR team where she doesn't even have a team. Some of these people she hasn't really talked to in years. She just sends them their 1099s each year and sends them their basically royalties or commissions from the sale of the product that they helped her create 5 years ago. And that's the lowest fine that we've seen. One of the reasons that it was so low, even though obviously the amount of money that was sent over to those individuals was significantly higher, and misclassification penalties are based on the history of the payments that go out, is because she got an attorney that helped her fight the case, that basically she settled on a $5,000 fine instead of a 30% of every payment that was submitted over the last 5 years. So on the flip side of that is a company that hired day of providers for a service that has been in business for 10 years. One person applied for unemployment when they were let go, found out that they were misclassified, which triggered an audit of all of the 1099 expenses for all of their day of providers. So their fine landed at $160,000. So that's my scary thing I'm going to say. But I'm going to flip it on its head a little bit and say, if you're running a creative business and you have an agency, this is all about managing risk. So there are things that we can do even within a day of talking to you to make sure that we're reducing your risk as much as possible, as well as making a really smooth transition from having contractors to employees. And sometimes that means we're calling in a lot of questions about other things within the business. So not to reiterate too much, but sometimes it's not quite as simple as moving my contractor over from a 1099 to a W-2 and payroll. Sometimes there's going to be a lot of other considerations that we're going to want to make if we're already making the investment to do that. Some of those questions are going to come in the form of perks and benefits. Some of those things are going to be in regards to strategic growth. And well, if I'm going to be equipped to have employees, then what else am I going to change in my business? Some of those things are just simply going to be, how are you going to communicate this to your team members without putting a big, huge target on your back when it comes to future audits or potential misclassification fines? All I'm saying is that if you only have the capacity to do one thing HR related in your business, make sure you're doing everything you can to ensure that your people are classified correctly. All of that other HR stuff literally doesn't even happen until after they're an employee. So we'll have a resource to send out that'll have some information there. And instead of being worried about it or stressed about it, try to think in the back of your head about how many of our clients, our peers, our friends have been brought to us in a situation where they were super pissed off or unhappy, or they feel like they were forced to hire employees that they didn't want to have, and now have the business and job of their dreams because they really were able to take control and understand some of the limitations that they may have put on themselves previously that they didn't even realize they were doing because they were limiting themselves with contract work, or maybe not being able to charge as much because the customer service isn't as high. Most of our clients do end up charging more for their services following working with us and having a lot less turnover and spending a lot less time on team issues, mostly because we can kind of consolidate teams down to a lower number of really high value people, especially on the design side and in marketing. That's just the way it's always been done. So this can usually be pretty shocking. Morgan, I imagine people watching this are probably going to be like, but that's just how it's done. And it's like, I could tell you more horror stories, but please just take my word for it. Now, after the fact of classification, there are compliance issues that come with HR. The laws that they're following, the trainings they have to do, sexual harassment, workers' comp, blah, blah, blah. Federal compliance on the HR front that applies to all employers, whether you have one employee or 500, are usually a much lower fine. So I would say the average that we've seen where we're cleaning up the mess is around $2,000. But of course, they do go up depending on how many employees they have and things like that. Not nearly as much of a risk as misclassification. So even if you're coming to us with 150 employees and you're having a federal compliance issue in like the state of New York and it's $250 per incident, we're usually landing at somewhere within a few $1,000s that we can help you to appeal and then land somewhere in this region. That being said, I haven't heard about every single penalty that's ever happened on federal compliance, but in the 105 clients that we've worked with through our signature service over the years, the ones that have come to us already with penalties, because obviously after they work with us, we don't have those anymore, are usually right around this amount, but they can be as low as $1,000 or something like that. Either way, none of us want to spend money on that, because when I think about it, I'm like, think of where that $2,000 could have gone. Think of how much time you could have bought back. Think of how many benefits you could have provided. Think of the bonus that you could have provided for yourself or others along the way. So I just like to make sure that this probably really scares you, but this is the best part about misclassification is that you can reduce your risk down to zero by ensuring that your people are classified correctly. So that's a really easy thing to do with a really high reward. And on that foundation, we can then leverage HR to make sure that you are, meaning HR compliance and knowledge, to make sure that you are not at risk in this area. And then state compliance, those things are few and far between, but they do happen. And it's not something that is only in the blue states or only in the red states. We see this across the board. The big, question mark or stressor that comes with state compliance issues on HR usually has to do with things that you never even knew existed or never even thought were relevant for your online business or your remote team or anything like that. And if you want to have freedom to hire in multiple states, then that means you're also juggling state compliance in multiple states. So are there states that enforce these things at a much higher rate? Absolutely. New York, California, Colorado, Nebraska, Texas, Florida. I know all over the board, like when it comes to like politics and stuff like that. And those are all the states that tend to come up most often. Oregon has a few, Washington, like pretty much everybody over here. I'm in San Diego, so all of us are dramatic, but they are generally something that's pretty easy to handle, more of a slap on the wrist, not going to make you lose too much sleep over it. But the big thing with all of these fines is that no one's going to tell you, hey, we're thinking about fining you, so maybe get that adjusted. You're literally just going to get the bill in the mail. It's not like you're going to court. This isn't like an HR court situation. It's literally just a bill. They've done the audit. They've initiated the audit on whatever it is that they're looking for, and now you've received your bill. So really, there isn't a lot of room between I've realized I'm doing something wrong and I got a bill. It's usually I got a bill and I had no idea I was doing that. So that's why I'm like, let me just shout this from the rooftops, because the more small businesses I can help, the more likely we're going to be successful. And then we don't have to deal with corporations for the rest of our lives. So all of this is to say that HR is not meant to be like a super scary thing. And Richard Branson, the rich guy I was talking about earlier, acknowledges this. So the quote, all too often, a company's HR department is seen as the enforcer of rules and policies, but in reality, HR is the heart of the company, ensuring that the organization's most valuable asset, its people, are well supported and positioned to succeed. The reason that I bring this up as a very direct, humble brag is that you as a CEO of your company are also the HR of your company. So it's your decision how effective you want to be at this job that can actually make you so much more money if done effectively and by utilizing strategies from experts that we've worked in this field for 15 years. And my team has as well. We have master's degrees in this area. We're just like any other discipline where there's going to be so many things that you didn't know. And it's going to open up so many doors and possibilities for your business. And it's kind of like one of those like hacks, I think, because really HR is a business strategist for businesses that really want to make sure that their people are supported. And if we wanted to get down to the simplistic, like the simple nature of it, of course, we're assessing risk. Of course, we're helping you with your recruiting. Of course, we're helping you with your handbook and making sure you're staying out of trouble. And we're giving you really good practices and all of that good stuff. But really, we're just setting you up to be a business that is going to put its people first. And the thing that I think gets missed a lot is that you are also people. So as a founder, you are also the people. So how do you want your business to treat you? And I think as a fellow founder, I go back and forth with that all the time. And like, for example, like the first thing that I'll let go of if things aren't going well is, well, I just won't get paid that month. But we can't do that. And that is actually part of our HR strategy to make sure that those things aren't happening for you. So at the same time, I just want to kind of point out that we're all in the same boat together, but we also want to make sure that any clients or anybody that's coming into our community and working with us, you're kind of stuck with us forever because, once you have HR, we build all your stuff. We know your people, they know us. I always just want to make sure people are really aligned, that they want to have a business that supports their people, because that is really what we stand for at the core. And so all of our clients will say that that is their motivation for wanting to make sure their HR is done. So I can threaten you all day about misclassification fines and all of this stuff. And I can overwhelm you all day with all the different things that HR could be doing in your business. But at the core of it, if you just want to make sure that your people are treated well, including you, and you want to have a longevity-driven business that's successful, that is agile, that you can try and experiment different things, then the best way to do that is to make sure that you're supported by the people that you've hired and that you're doing what your due diligence to ensure that you're allowed to have them on your team. This is my little pitch thing. So Paradigm Solution is our 90-day service that I talked about earlier. We start this at $6,000. We have plenty of payment plans. We do really, really flexible. So if your business is in a position to need to get all of your HR in order, we pack it all into 90 days. And then you have optional retainers that you can tap into later. But this will build out all of those categories for you so that you can utilize that to grow your business. Plus, we just build a really solid relationship and become something of a consultant for the efficacy of your business overall. But Paradigm Solution isn't for everybody. I personally tell everyone, if you're just hiring your first employee, I want you to go and do that and take on some of the risk and use that $6,000 to hire that second employee and then come to us. So our ideal clients are usually right around the realization that they're probably going to need 2 or more employees, and they're either going to go into maintenance mode or growth mode right after. We have some other alternatives and things like that to help you if you're kind of right at that beginning journey, but this is really like our bread and butter and where the magic happens when it comes to what we've created for small businesses in particular. Oh, what do you have for me, Morgan?
Yeah. Can you talk us through what those are?
So one of the things, this HR self-assessment for small businesses is new. We just came out with it recently. So that is basically just a Google Doc checklist of, we used to offer audits for companies to come in. And so basically I just translated that over so that you can audit yourself. And the reason for that is because sometimes we have clients that'll come through that have some of the pieces, but not all of them. So this will draw attention to some of the things that you might need in order to lower your risk as much as possible. But at the same time, that might mean that you don't necessarily have to go through the Paradigm solution first, and you can jump right into one of our retainers or one of those things. So we want to make sure that we have as many flexible options there as we can. But I would just suggest, that's a very overwhelming checklist. I put a Loom video at the beginning begging people not to get overwhelmed, but know that you're supposed to start at zero. This checklist isn't like, so for many businesses, it's not like, so what have you already built? It's really going to be more along the lines of like, everyone starts at zero and then works through things as we go. So don't feel shamed or like, what the hell does that mean? Or, any of those feelings. Like, you're really not supposed to know, but that is really there for you to kind of download, save into your Google Drive, and revisit it when you have the time. If you take a look at it and you have 5 employees and you can't check off more than 10 things on that list, you probably need HR right away. But if you're a solopreneur that's thinking about classifying people in a different way, this is a great place for you to start so you can see what type of undertaking it will be to have employees. Because one thing about me is I will never convince you to have a team. You have to be excited about it, because your entire job changes from being the person that you are now to being a leader of other people. So it's a very big shift, and it's really fun and it's really rewarding. And I know that every business owner eventually gets there, because that's where growth kind of takes you, but I'm not going to rush you. So that gives you like a pretty good idea of what might be next. If you need a little push, fill out our form on our website, reply back to one of the emails that we send you. We'll hop on a call. I'm happy to push you if that's what you really need. But for the most part, I think that initial resource, the employer contractor classification, is going to come in really handy to kind of show you whether or not you're ready for that second checklist or assessment. And then we offer free consults so we can fill in the gaps if you're like, am I really screwed, or am I really going to get in trouble? And I'll be honest with you about that. There's definitely been calls where I've been like, you could probably invest in whatever you're torn between at the moment, because I don't think your risk level is super high right now. I can't guarantee it, but I'm happy to tell you what that looks like, especially given how many clients we've worked with and how many things that we've dealt with. And I'm proud to say that we have never had to go to court for any of our clients. And in my entire career, there's been close calls. But in 12 and a half years of leading HR for a small business of 50 employees, I've never had to step foot in a courtroom because of the HR policies that we've created.
That's a great review. On your website. Okay, cool. Okay, let's see. So this is going to be a fun little, people are going to get to see some real behind the scenes of me growing my business since we have a little bit of time. So I think my biggest shoot that I'm sure other people probably are having is I already have contractors in my business. Maybe they should have been employees this whole time. So I'm sure you see that all the time. So what advice would you give somebody in that situation? Because I think for me also, especially when I first started kind of building a team, my hesitation with employees was it feels like a really big commitment, right? Mm-hmm. And then I also I don't want to have to worry about paying their taxes and insurance and yada, yada, yada. I just want to pay somebody to do the thing and have them do the thing. And now that I understand a little more about what differentiates a contractor from an employee, I'm well, they are doing all the exact same tasks for me every month. And we do have standing meetings. So I am kind of controlling their time. And there's a little bit of gray area of maybe I could sell it that they're a contractor, but maybe not. So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think the first step is just to break it down piece by piece and try to figure out where you think your highest risk point is. So if there's someone in your mind that you're yeah, this business would really suffer if I didn't have them in this role, then that means that if you had a little bit more control, if you were building a culture, if you were offering them something with longevity, then that same kind of it's equal and opposite effect. Wow, the company would really suffer if they weren't here. But if they were optimized, what would happen to the company? So I think in those cases, we just start with your lowest risk point and turn it into what is the possibility here. What usually happens in those cases is that it becomes actually less about the individual and more about the role that you're building in your business. So very soon in that conversation where we identify that they might need to be an employee, it actually becomes, well, what type of employee does my business need? So maybe just kind of assess your risk, skip past all that, and then get to the point where you're starting to dream about what type of employee does this need? What does a job description look like? What would change? How would my offers benefit from something like this? And then we can kind of reverse engineer that into how you afford it, how you put a budget together, and then we just move on to the next person and start to see how those things fit together. One thing that I've noticed is, and one of the reasons we used to have a whole service that was all hire your first employee in a month. And one of the reasons we stopped doing that is because every single one of those clients had to upgrade to our 90-day package because it was real. What ended up happening is they started to see, oh, well, there's all this possibility. And now I'm dictating the rates. So what can I afford? And oh, I have really low risk. So I could totally bring someone on to do that. And they start to see the business as something that they have a lot more freedom with, and they start to see the possibilities. So I think that we can look at it piece by piece and start with the highest risk point. But what ends up happening is that you kind of have to take a step back very soon after that first job description is built and be like, okay, well, now I need to look at my organizational structure as a whole and also my offers, because what can change within my offers and what can I dictate? And then we just want to make sure that we're always bringing it back to you as the founder, as the owner, especially in a small business, of what role you want to play. So all those three things kind of play together, even with just the first person that you're considering bringing over.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And I think I don't know, there's so many things in business that we make out to be way scarier than they really are. Cause I have friends who have employees, W-2 employees in their business, and they're like, it's not any different. So my VA, I hire her through a VA agency. And so it just gets a little sticky because I'm functionally, she functions like an employee, but since she works for another agency, that makes
Yeah.
it change.
Yeah. But they're in that particular case, they're assuming the risk. So I don't think I'm like, yeah, great. If
Not
you
a
don't want to have
problem.
an employee, whatever, that's their problem. But that's for that specific role. If you had, I'm just imagining that you probably have a branding and web package or something like that.
Mhm.
So thinking about when you start to bring people into your processes, your frameworks, your mechanisms, then you're starting to talk about intellectual property. And if your agreement is with someone that then works for someone else, then suddenly that's all getting real watered down along the way. And you're not really protecting the integrity of the functionality of your business. But a VA, let someone else take the risk, especially if you want to stay solo. There's tons of little hacks that you can do to make sure that you're protecting yourself. But I do find that the more of those hacks you're employing, the less likely your business is to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're trying to duct tape it together, is probably not a good long-term solution. Yeah. Cool. Well, that was my big question. How's the best way for somebody to connect with you? I know you mentioned a free consultation. I personally really enjoy following you on Threads, but where do you like to hang out?
It's crazy over there. You can tell no one's approving those posts. I do hang out on Instagram quite a bit, but Threads is a really fun place to interact with people. But generally speaking, Instagram's great. And then I would just say download our resources, whichever one is most relevant to you. We have great informational funnels built out to follow up with all of those resources. So, and every single one filters right back into my inbox. So if you have questions or if you need a consult, I'll send you over links to schedule that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say for anyone watching a recording that does not have a team and is just in the thinking about building a team stage, I can tell you from experience, it's better to take the time to do it right the first time than, I could go on about hiring horrors, but I think this is one thing that you don't want to cut corners on. So definitely reach out.
Yeah. There's this experimental piece of business that I find that my I call them coworkers, but our fellow founders and community members and stuff that we hang out with in business, don't always feel confident doing or innovating or doing experiments because of the people that they would need to support them. So as much as I love my team, there's always ups and downs. There's always stress. There's always days where I'm burning it down and going solo. But I think that people have those when they have contractors too. So it's not just, on that front. But I will say that it's just, we have to be able to keep our brains functioning and innovating. That's why we became entrepreneurs in the first place. And having a team has really been the only way I could confidently do that and experiment. And having the HR, obviously knowing I'm not going to get sued and stuff, is I can do a lot of stuff and try a lot of things and not have to worry about getting sued because I know my company has my back. And not all of it works. And some of it's hard, but some of it's a lot of money. And that's been nice.
Yeah. And I mentioned this at the beginning whenever you asked about pain points in business, but with the exception of you who has a corporate career background in HR, almost none of us come into this with experience leading teams or building teams or managing people and having some of those uncomfortable conversations. So I think if it's something that you can afford to invest in some support, I would highly, highly recommend, or at least just like educate yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a lot. I mean, it is a lot, but there is a point where you can do a pretty good job on the like 1 or 2 employee front with handling some of those logistics. But it's always good to have us in your back pocket if there starts to be some friction points or, whatever. But people are weird because we are unpredictable. And so that's why we will always have a job. I was like, HR could go with whatever's happening right now. HR could go totally by the wayside and be like, we no longer need you because no one cares about any people ever.
It's just
Sorry.
wild.
Yeah. Like who knows what's going to happen? Or it could go on the total opposite front where HR is like even more needed than ever and really busy. And based on, what I've been experiencing, it's teetering in that direction because there's no one else really tasked with the protection of the people, and managers need support in figuring out how to navigate really complicated and nuanced issues. So I'm not saying I know all the answers, but I know how to help you solve them without, making things worse.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think something that you touched on with the Richard Branson quote is like when I was in corporate, HR is the people who you go to when you get hired, when you're in trouble, or when you get fired. So there's not like a very positive connotation. And I think something that you're doing really well is teaching us that that's not the case, and that like really the reason why you invest in HR support, I think, is to avoid all of those scenarios in the first place and just keep things humming along and everybody happy and growing and fulfilled so that you're not dealing with having to fire people or have people quit or getting sued or.
Yeah, that's very time consuming when you're already trying to run a business. And then there's also this like I just thought of this and I think it might be smart, but there's also this like element of we think about that as employees. Like we think we're going to HR for all these things. But when you're a founder, you're suddenly like, oh, right.
Yeah. It's like
that
joke
makes sense.
of like you're looking around for like, where's the adult? And then you're like, oh shoot, I am the adult. That's like that. You should.
I know. I know. And it's also very shocking. Like some of our clients are like, they're kind of like high profile people and they're like asking me like what to do with their business. And I'm like, are you sure you want me to know that? Like me to answer? Like me? Like you're famous. Like, I'm like, are you sure you want to know my opinion? But I'm sure that's like not the best, advertisement for like hire me. But it is definitely like one of those moments where I'm like, yeah, I know exactly what you should do, but I just can't believe you're asking me that. Like it's such a weird feeling. I'm sure you have that too with design, like probably like, just hearing the needs of business owners, especially like really highly developed ones or that have big names in the space.
Yeah, I think like we're really going on a tangent here, so feel free to turn off the recording, but I think this is an interesting conversation. My thing has been, and this happened to me recently, like I had somebody come to me for branding and a website and was like, fine. And I was like, okay, well, tell me about what you've done for that stuff in the past. And they were like, I hired this person and here's what they made me. And I was like, I have been like following and looking up to that designer for like probably 7 or 8 years now. Like they're like on my vision board. I want to be like you whenever I grow up. And you're coming to me and being like, can you fix it? Like this is the weirdest thing ever.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I've seen a few times, I don't know, maybe not so much lately, but you have posted on Instagram like screenshots from your membership where people are like, hey, this crazy thing happened today with one of my employees. What do I do? And I think that's like so helpful when people being like, okay, it's not just me. And even if I'm doing everything right, like things are still going to go sideways and it's fine. Like we'll just work through it.
Yeah. And our membership is so cool because we just have like, basically the way that it's structured is that we realized over the years that people still need private access to us because not everything is going to go out to the masses. But the people that have elected to be in that level of our retainer, it's only $500 a month. And we handle like pretty much everything, onboarding, offboarding, we do a consult, talk you through your employee stuff, but they still go to the membership community for stuff like that because it's like, yeah, Kira and Kylie can help me about all this stuff, or Abby and Kylie can, or whoever is on the team working on it. But then we get a lot of questions in the membership that are like, I'm having a really hard time finding a designer. Like, how do you like know if someone's a good designer? Like, you can't like explain why it's a good design. And I'm like, well, I certainly can't. So I'm glad you're going to the membership with that one. But we can help build strategies to get you as much information as possible so that you can make that decision about intangible skills, but especially with creatives. I feel like it can be so frustrating to like think somebody's being brought in with like a specific skill set. And then you're like, oh, that was something your team at your job worked on. You actually didn't design a damn thing. Like I've seen that happen a lot.
Yep. Yeah. And kind of the flip side of that, like being a creative business owner where like I am employing other designers or copywriters or whatever, I think having like some type of HR framework is important because there's a lot of feelings involved
Mhm.
with that type of work, right? And so
Yeah.
you have to kind of separate the two. And I talk about this on my podcast a little bit of like, just because somebody says like, I didn't like the way you designed this thing, or this was not great about the process of working with you. Like, it's not about you. But for me, as the person with people on my team, like sometimes I have a hard time being like, hey, that design actually kind of sucks. Can you try again? Or like, this isn't working out because our styles just don't match or whatever. Because people are going to take it personally. So having even just somewhere to go and get like a gut check of like, I'm pretty sure I'm doing the right thing here, but can you like tell me I'm doing the right thing so I feel
Yeah.
better about it, I think is really, really helpful.
Yeah, we've kind of built all this as over the years, like realizing what our ideal clients need. And our ideal clients are creative people. Like at the end of the day, those are the most fun projects to work on. They're the most fun teams to build. They're the most, usually you can really see the profits because we work hard on those labor margin calculations and you get tools and stuff like that. So it's really fun to like kind of see how that develops. And it's just not as fun when it's like a, random dude with a, tire shop or, those are great, but like, it's not quite as fun when they're just doing it for the compliance and not for the culture and the people. Like it's a tough
Yeah.
bridge.
And I mean, I would imagine that, like, no pun intended, but there's just a lot less room for creativity in like you're just selling tires. There's not so many ways that you can. But with like a business like mine, like the possibilities are like really, truly endless. So
Yeah. And with designers too, like, and we can totally schedule a consult. I'm not trying to like pitch you or anything, but if you're feeling like you want to, don't hesitate to reach out. Cause I think sometimes people like, I don't know, like we like become friends and then they don't want to or something. But
well,
if
and
you were to do that, like I would be like, well, what are you worried about? Because there's so many areas that we could offload things off your plate. Like it could just be like hiring you an ops person. It could be a designer to help you with offers. Like there's so many areas we can start. You can kind of like dip your foot in and then also make sure your people are classified correctly.
yeah. And I think too, for anyone who's still with us on the recording, I sometimes hesitate to like schedule consultations with somebody like Kira, for example, because I'm like, I don't think I'm ready to hire them yet. Like, I'm curious about your service, but it's probably going to be maybe 6 months or a year before I'm ready to like pull the trigger. And so I don't want to feel like two things. Don't want to feel like I'm wasting your time. Secondly, I don't want to get on a call with you and then I'm like on your list of like people to follow up with. And then you're like hounding me like a car salesman and that's annoying.
Yeah, I'm not that organized.
So anyone that's watching the recording that's like, I'm just curious about any of this, like just book a consultation. It's fine. I promise.
Yeah. Yeah. And also that's kind of the cool thing about Instagram too, is that like people will be like, can I book a call? Like, I think I'm having a problem. And I'm like, well, tell me what it is. Cause I might just be able to tell you the answer or send you a blog,
And like,
so like,
yeah.
and then if you're like, oh, I still, I don't care. Just like, I mean, I guess the only thing is like, just don't get me all attached to your team and then ghost me.
Just be a little respectful.
Yeah. Or just like, hey, I'm totally thinking about this in 6 months. Follow up with me then. That I can do because it takes me about 6 months to follow up with you anyway.
Perfect. Cool.
But yeah, no
All right, well,
pressure sales here. Like I said, I'm not here to convince people to do anything. I just want to make sure people understand that this is something we have to do. And I don't want to, I hope to hear from you before you get in trouble because that is becoming, it used to be like, I'm so excited to grow my team. And now it's like every other call is like, I'm screwed and I need to do my HR due diligence so I can reduce my penalty by 30%.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, nice to meet you. I'm sorry you hate me already. Everyone over. And then they never can live without us and whatever. And I post all those testimonials, but it can be really scary, especially to meet with someone like me that like never shuts up. So,
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, that was a super fun conversation. Thanks for joining us.
yeah.
And yeah, highly, highly recommend follow Kira on Threads and Instagram. And if you are like, I want to maybe start a team in the next 6 months, reach out and chat with her.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much, Morgan.
Morgan here. I hope you enjoyed that training from the Six Figure Brand Society Vault. We are so grateful to Kira for sharing her time with us. All of her links will be in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this training and you want to learn more about how you can join the Six Figure Brand Society for monthly trainings like this, along with hands-on support from me in growing your online business and creating a sustainable six-figure brand, all the details about what that looks like and next steps for you to take are going to be in the show notes as well. Thanks for tuning in to the Six Figure Brand Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to rate the show and leave a review on whatever app you're listening on. And as a thank you, I'll send you coffee on me. Yes, I'm serious. As a smaller show for now, you taking the time to do this makes a huge impact on how we can reach more people and how I can continue to create this content for free. When you take a screenshot of your review, follow and tag me on Instagram at @SpectandCo. I'll send you a $5 Starbucks gift card. As always, don't forget to check out the show notes for any links or resources I mentioned during the episode. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you next week.